Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for everyone who's been waiting for me. And welcome to all of our regular viewers and our new viewers as well. Let's give ourselves a second to make sure everything's up and running before we get into tonight's topics. We have a couple of things to speak about tonight, primarily from Lebanon. Here we are, we're live now. Okay, again, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. And I spoke about a couple of things really in my previous videos. One of them is Ilan Pape being arrested. Yeah. Why do they have to arrest the good people from Israel? Why don't they arrest the bad people? Ilan Pape is an Israeli historian who I always quote. He wrote The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. They arrest him, the FBI, detain him, okay, not arrest him, detain him, question him, so we don't mislead people. I heard other reports that he was detained in Chicago too. But I find it fascinating, you know. They detain, question, harass people who oppose the genocide. But if you participate in the genocide, if you actually murder people, children, women, whatever it is, if you're active, then fine, no problem. Come back, lecture, do whatever you like. It's absurd, really. They allowed him in and they copied his phone, all of the details. Fascinating. I had another video about updates from Hezbollah and from Gaza, and tonight I'm going to also be talking to you about Hezbollah. We are having a lot of developments from Hezbollah. I always speak about the level of sophistication when it comes to Hezbollah, the level of attacks, the type of attacks, the quality of attacks, the quantity of attacks. Now they're using S-5 rockets from UAVs, suicide UAVs, and they launch missiles as well before they hit the target and explode too. Today, they had over 120 missiles, 120 missile strikes on Israel. They targeted the Ministry of Defense bases and locations, high sensitivity, some of the most advanced and sophisticated places in Israel, army bases, factories. They're going deeper into Israel. And Israel doesn't have a response, doesn't have a sufficient response, and the people are concerned. And again, the ironic thing is, instead of Israel looking to provide a solution once and for all, they remain delusional and arrogant, and they continue their attacks, and they find military and try and find military solutions instead of implementing equality. It's pretty easy. You implement equality, you get rid of the problem. There wouldn't be a problem if you had equality between the Jordan River and the sea. But no, Israel, as usual, they want to solve things militarily. It comes from the way they were established as a colonial, supremacist and violent and racist entity that is enabled by Western powers in the Middle East. Because otherwise, if they're not enabled, how would they carry out such acts? Why would they continue? They know they have the help. This is how they were established. And to them, the countries that are enabling them and supporting them, the powers that are enabling them and supporting them, to be more specific, because there's a very big gap between the people in power and the actual people. And this is very evident. And instead of these countries that call themselves democratic trying to listen to their population and take action, and the action that they are requesting is very simple: simply stop supporting genocide. Stop supporting genocide. That's it. It's not too difficult. No, they come up with draconian laws. They fire people. Now they're firing people. I heard it was the top head of the university in California, if I'm not mistaken, because he listened to the students. But at least they're exposing themselves for who they are. However, what's happening, in my opinion, proves that there's a lot of work to be done, a lot more work to be done. Even if this ends tomorrow, and it's not gonna end tomorrow, by the way. I mean, the genocide in Gaza, there's a lot of work to be done. There are things that have been rotting there for too long. Otherwise, how can you explain that? Now, they managed to do it by keeping people asleep and apathetic and making them scared, making them afraid, fear everything to do with other people, other nations, other religions, other countries, to justify their crimes, their ongoing crimes, their draconian laws, draconian measures, acts, actions abroad in many cases that have nothing to do with their security or them thriving or their economy, but only depend on the interests of very, very few people, not many people, very few people in power who are willing to sacrifice their own people for their own financial and political greed. So, with Hezbollah, obviously 120 missiles on so many bases. What I want to talk to you about, and then I will obviously open the space up for you for your comments and questions. We had an article again in the Israeli newspaper Ma'arif. By the way, some of you asked for the article that I quoted yesterday, and I sent them as individual messages in replies to some of people who posted comments. But if you would like me to post regularly links to the articles that I speak about, I'd be more than happy to. Mind you, sometimes they might be in the original language. You can use a translator or any types of translating service so that you can see everything. But just tell me, really, and I wouldn't have a problem sending them. It's just that obviously with the level of videos that I produce and publish, I don't really have a lot of time to, have attention to all of the small things to do with details and uploading everything. Like, for example, with the videos, you'll see upload defaults with basic things that are repeated. I don't talk about in the description box, I wouldn't talk about the videos that I say, but obviously if that's something that you guys require, I just let me know. Obviously, if there's enough people requesting that, I'd be more than happy to uh, do it, or obviously communicate with me directly, and I would be happy to share these with you. But I said that because yesterday I had particularly quite a few people ask me that, and I replied to them. Some emailed me as well, and again, you just communicate with me, and I'd be more than happy to submit these. So, with regards to this article that I want to speak with you about, it's in the Israeli newspaper Ma'arif. Obviously, and it's in Hebrew. I translate it. I obviously send to anyone if they want it later on. But they were talking about Hezbollah taking the surveillance balloon and the recent targets that they had. And again, we have people from this Alma Research Center in Israel talking about this and linking this to Iran. They said after the IDF admitted that a Hezbollah drone hit the site where the Air Force's warning balloon is located, researcher Tal Bari from the Alma Research Institute explains the consequences. The hit allows them to disrupt Israel's intelligence image. The hit allows them to disrupt Israel's intelligence image. Now, before I continue, yesterday I spoke about the level of quality and live intel that Hezbollah possesses. It's as if they have live information from Israel, where their soldiers are based, what are they about to do, even if Israel is about to establish a new base in a settlement that is close to the borders, Hezbollah will attack during formation, as and when they are setting it up. They continued. Alarms were activated along the northern border since the morning hours. Hezbollah accepted responsibility for 10 launches fired from Lebanese territory. That's apart from the 120 in total today. Obviously, now we're at the end of the day. 120 in total from Lebanon to Israel. The IDF admitted later that a Hezbollah drone was launched deep into Israeli territory last night and hit the site where Tal Shamayim Air Force warning balloon is located, near the Golani Junction. That's very close to Tiberias, about 50 kilometers from the Lebanese borders. Another UAV launched towards the area of Tiberias is intercepted. In response to this, the Air Force attacked the Hezbollah precision rocket and aircraft production site in Lebanon. Hezbollah is trying to damage Israel's strategic assets, says Tal Bari from the Alma Research Institute regarding Israel's security challenges in the north. The military site near the Golani intersection is particularly sensitive with advanced detection and warning systems and is part of the Israeli air defense systems and contributes an essential intelligence picture to the defense of the aerospace. For Hezbollah, this injury is significant since it allows them to disrupt the formation of Israel's intelligence picture as far as the organization is concerned. In the warning balloon, they tried to hit, well, they actually, I don't know what I'm saying, tried to hit now. There is a camera that is connected to essential command and control systems, from which they process and transmit data about what is happening in Lebanon. So it is very symbolic that the site where Tal Shamayim was hit, whose role is to warn against UAV attacks, was itself hit by a Hezbollah UAV. They want to disrupt our ability to identify and neutralize UAVs, UFOs. Hezbollah is intensifying its attempts to blindside the IDF and damage the army's various means of observation. There are cameras on an observation balloon from several angles, so it is possible to see it from a very great distance, literally all of southern Lebanon. All of southern Lebanon, reveals Professor Amitzia Baram, a senior researcher in the Department of Middle Eastern History at the University of Haifa. I estimate that the observation balloon is located dozens of kilometers from the border and not from the front line, since it has a very great intelligence value. Again, listen to the terms and how important it is, and the fact that Hezbollah knew about its existence, where it's located, and hit it directly deep into Israeli territory. The balloon provides extensive information about the activities of the organization. He says and emphasizes Hezbollah's methodical approach to hitting the IDF's observation means. Even in the attacks on Mount Meron, Hezbollah tries to hit the air control unit in order to hurt the eyes of the Air Force and the IDF. This is so important to the organization since they are aware that through various means, such as the observation balloons and the air control unit, the army translates what it sees into intelligence, which gives the IDF the option to precisely eliminate Hezbollah's commanders and know where they are. The UAV was launched last night as only part of Hezbollah's method of operation during the past few months. Recently, we have witnessed an increase in the use of UAVs by Hezbollah and an increase in their lethality. During the month of March 24, incidents of infiltration by UAVs took place. In April, the number rose to 42 incidents. In the month of May, 19 incidents were recorded up until mid-May. Up until the middle of May. The increase in the use of UAVs at Hezbollah demonstrates the difficulty in dealing with this type of weapon. Difficulties in the ability to detect it early. Hezbollah's methods of operation, the way the UAVs are flown, and Russian learning lessons from the war in Ukraine applied to the Iranian UAVs used by Hezbollah. These are the reasons that pose a great challenge to intercepting. He's linking Hezbollah's experience and success with these UAVs to the Russian experience in Ukraine, clearly linking the Russians with Hezbollah and Russia providing Hezbollah with this intel to make their UAVs more accurate, more specific, and more lethal. They continued, a flight speed of up to 300 kilometers an hour is indeed fast for UAV. But this is relatively slow speed for a weapon with a steep trajectory and an aircraft, and therefore may make detection by radars difficult. Also, the terrain conditions, the mountains, they make it more difficult for the detection capabilities of the radars operating in the sector. The difficulty arising from Hezbollah's methods of operations reflected in Hezbollah's activity to locate weakness in the Israeli defense systems, the deployment of many pre-prepared and camouflage launch sites, and the manner of which UAVs are flown to the target. In order to make its attacks as effective as possible, Hezbollah constantly examines Israel's detection systems by launching drones on different routes and flight profiles in order to identify loopholes and weaknesses. At the same time, Hezbollah employs tactics designed to make early identification of launch sites and operatives difficult and shorten the attack times. They finished it up, just a couple of more sentences, and I'll open the space up for you. For this purpose, Hezbollah distributed many UAVs ready for action in the territory of southern Lebanon close to the border and hid them in prepared positions in open areas and within the built-up area. This advanced preparation saves a lot of time in preparing the UAV for launch and makes it very difficult to thwart it. In addition, the proximity of the launch sites to the border greatly shortens the flight times and makes it even more difficult for the detection and interception systems. They continued, Iranian advisors are on Lebanese soil. It's no secret. They also come with military capabilities. Targeted assassinations do not only kill the number of attacks, but also generate target intelligence. The IDF attacks with force. From time to time, we will express an opinion within our people we sit. It is clear that sometimes will provoke reactions for and against. That is the idea. The opinions remain for a period of time, then return to the main concern. The day blog was founded, centered on Mudain Iran Hezbollah. That's the last detail from the website itself. However, what they're clarifying here, and that's something we always speak about with regards to Hezbollah, that what we understand is that Israel doesn't have an answer. So in my previous video where I spoke about a brief summary with regards to the resistance actions today from Gaza and Lebanon is the fact that Israel isn't able to provide an answer. Usually, Israel would target any UAVs inside of Lebanon. This is how it was. So, what people need to understand is the level that we're at the moment is an extreme success to the resistance. The resistance wasn't able to conduct actions at such levels with such precision and such intensity successfully ever previously. And if we're talking about a limited campaign from Hezbollah and not an all out war with Israel, what would an all out war be? What would it look like? It proves what we spoke about with the IDF general yesterday, Yitzhak Brik, and the fact that Israel is not ready for an all out war. If Israel is unable to defeat the Palestinian resistance after approximately 8 months of continuous bombardment and genocide and using all the weapons in its arsenal, butchering people left, right, and center, if they're unable to find an answer when they are inside the territory of Gaza, and if they are unable to find an answer to Hezbollah when they're in Israel, things are changing. This wasn't the case before. Hezbollah is keeping Israel busy inside of Israel. The moment, the moment that Israel sets foot in Lebanon, they face fierce resistance immediately. They attempted 3 invasions so far during this war, this escalation with Lebanon since the 7th of October. All of them were conducted by the Golani Brigade, special forces, elite units from the Golani. In all of these attempts, all of them came back to Israel as casualties. All of the force, either dead or wounded. So they do not have an answer with Hezbollah. And the thing is, they will not be finding an answer. They will not be finding an answer. And that was the main article. Let me open the space up for you. See if you have any questions or comments. Let's go to live. Someone's telling me about the subscriptions. Okay. I got several reports in the last few days about people being unsubscribed. And what I would say is, obviously, subscribe again. However, also raise it with YouTube. Okay, regardless of what anyone might think, you follow the procedure that you need to follow. You obviously subscribe again, because I had this before and I'm having like another wave of that. And report it, flag it to YouTube. And it's important that they know that there is a problem, obviously, with you and with many of you, because if I also report it to YouTube directly, they will ask me about the subscribers themselves. So you obviously would help me by reporting it directly, and the more people report if there's a problem, I mean, we hope they solve it. At one point, I wasn't receiving as much reports about this. You would obviously help me in raising this with YouTube so that they can find an answer or look into this further. Because a couple of you said that, not just one. And Muna too said that. Where were we? Interesting. From Talal, and I actually wanted to have a separate video about that, by the way. Talal, thanks for that question. You said, how do you translate Putin's visit to China after Xi just made a European tour? Well, obviously, China and Russia both look at their own interests, but they clearly have a strategic partnership that is being deepened, it's becoming more and more tight. They declare that they will tighten the relationship between them because they see what they are faced with. They are faced with the arrogance of the powers of Western countries. And I also give an example of the tone that's coming out from China and Russia. Look at Palestine. Like I always used to say, Palestine is the moral compass of these world countries. You know, ever since all of these escalations previously happened. But look at the tone of China, look at the tone of Russia. For example, when they recently had, firstly, they try and unite the Palestinians. Isn't that fascinating? So, firstly, both of them in the UN immediately after the 7th of October, they called for a ceasefire. That who rejected? Britain, US, France, other European countries rejected the ceasefire. So they have blood on their hands. Each country that voted against the proposal of the ceasefire that was put forward by China and Russia and Brazil, they have blood on their hands. All of them, apart from the fact that they support Israel. So they tried to reach a ceasefire to stop the suffering, stop the genocide. Even before we had big levels of devastation and destruction and casualties. Who didn't listen? Again, US, European countries, mostly. Vetoes as well. So, in essence, for argument's sake, if we didn't have the US with a veto power, for example, at the UN, we wouldn't have had a genocide. That's apart from the support. Okay. They tried to stop the war. Perfect. They tried to bring the Palestinian political movements together. We had a meeting in February in Russia, and we had a meeting very recently in China that we didn't hear many details about, by the way, afterwards. And I spoke about the outcome of the meeting in Russia at the time. But what I wanted to highlight is the tone from the Russian foreign minister at the time. The Russian foreign minister, when he sat with the Palestinian movement, he told them, we are not in a position to tell you what to do. But what we would advise you is to have some sort of a united front so that we can try and reach the solution with our friends in other countries, in Western countries. Look at the tone. Look at the tone. And the same applies with China. Compare that with the tone of Britain, British government officials. Compare that to the tone of the US administration officials and other EU states. How do they speak? Oh, they don't have a right to be in power in Gaza. Hamas don't have a right to be there. We need to have a technocratic government. We need to ensure the safety of Israel. The typical neo-colonialist, arrogant, and racist mentality. And that's why they support Israel. Arrogant, racist, neo-colonialist mentality. The same applies with Africa. You're having more and more withdrawal of colonial powers from Africa, namely France and the US. What happens after they withdraw? Unity. African countries start to talk about unity between them. Is there no intervention from China and Russia in Africa? Of course there is. China, they're building the future of Africa with gigantic, enormous infrastructure projects. But how do they approach it? How do they approach it? They approach it in a collaborative manner, in an understanding manner. They speak with the nations not as slaves to the masters like Western countries do, typical supremacy. They approach it with your people like us, and we want our interest. China even lifted 50 billion in debt from African countries. Obviously, there's return. For example, exploration, more projects, what have you. Obviously, it's a world of interest we're talking about. But we're talking about what we want to show here is the mentality and the approach in how they deal with such countries. So both of them feel like they're being met with this hostility from Western powers, and they're threatened by them. Russia's threatened by the US and the EU with this proxy war in Ukraine. That has nothing to do with the Ukrainian people, by the way. It only has to do with the greed of the US empire. And EU follows suit. EU is a little puppet of the United States. I mean, anyone who doesn't think that don't have their facts straight. Otherwise, why would EU states take such measures with Russia and affect all of their populations? For the sake of Ukrainian people? Do you want me to believe that? Do you think I would buy that? Shooting your own people for the sake of the Ukrainian people? Or is it for the sake of the US empire and its interests in Russia as a whole? Because many people forget that it's not like they want to intimidate Russia or they want to have Russia do something. They want Russia. They want Russia as a country. Russia is a very big country with lots of gas, very powerful country, and they want it. They want to put a government in power in Russia that will be bound by the US empire. They want Russia to be like other EU states, bar a few, bar a few. But when you talk about, for example, UK, Germany, and in many cases France too, mostly aligned. You'll have a bit of a disagreement from France here and there, but mostly they are aligned. So obviously the Chinese and the Russians, they know that, and they take measures to protect themselves. Obviously, China's facing that with Taiwan too. And look at the arrogance. They complain. Who complains? The US complains when there is a Chinese fighter jet coming next to their jets or their fleet or whatever in the South China Sea. Why are you interrupting us? In the South China Sea. If we want to apply the same actions to other countries, then China would send fighter jets and aircraft carriers and what have you to the coasts of California and New York and Florida. What's your problem? But this is the colonialist mentality, the arrogance, the colonialist mentality that we should get over. Really, we should be done by this by now. We need to have a multipolar world where each country respects its neighbors. But this mentality still controls Western powers, and it's not going to go anywhere unless there's enough action being taken against it, unless people speak about it. And how do they continue with this mentality and with this approach by obviously making the population apathetic and fearful. Apathetic by making them ignorant and focus on things that have no substance whatsoever. Fearful by saying everyone else is a threat to you, so you need to listen to us. Controlled by fear. So they thrive on racism, they thrive on hate, they thrive on division. They promote these things. That's why to them, Israel and the Middle East is wonderful. Racism, hate, violence, chaos, this is what they want. They just don't want it at a level where they'll have a headache like they're having now. Now they're having a headache. They don't want the headache, but they do want them there. And that's why it's important that everyone continues with their activity, as small as they may see it, but it's great in the grand scheme of things, and it's very effective. Like I said, whether it's viewing, posting, watching, liking, protesting, whatever it is. And completely demolishing the mainstream narrative and the lies that are being fed to the people. And that was from Talal. Imdad is asking, Brother Mahmoud, how big is damage the Yemen do on USA warship? Quite a big of damage, but they didn't release images. And obviously the US didn't submit the full details, which is typical. However, they weren't active very much before. And now Yemen, and that's another thing that I want to talk to you about, by the way. Now, Ansarullah, the leader of Ansarullah, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, he obviously said that we're going to stretch our operations to the Mediterranean. They hinted before, just a few days ago. And what he said is, I would hope that our Chinese and Russian counterparts would understand our actions. If they don't want kind of any misunderstandings with them, but clearly there's a level of coordination. Excessive Fours asking, Mahmoud, what are your thoughts on the US being stationed at the pier in Gaza? Do you think it's classified as boots on ground? Well, firstly, this project is ambiguous and I don't trust anything coming from the US or Israel. That's number one. They are two genocidal countries and I don't trust them whatsoever. That's number one. And anyone who supported this genocide or was quiet about this genocide, I have no trust or faith or respect for them in any way, shape, or form. That's my position. Secondly, they are just about to finish it. They're just about to finish it, and they're saying it's only for aid that Israel approves through Cyprus. Why do we have to go this long-winded route to Gaza? Why? You have thousands of trucks on land. You can have aid coming in through Israeli ports, through the crossings on land, and obviously from the Israeli ports to the ground route to Gaza, through Erez checkpoint, Kisufim, Kerem Shalom, Karem Abu Salim, and what have you. And obviously from Egypt, you have the Rafah crossing. What is this about exactly? It's about, at least in my opinion, about a much more malicious and evil project, which is the ethnic cleansing and expelling the Palestinian people. I don't believe it's about aid. If you were concerned about aid, there are aid trucks on the ground. You'd open the borders and you'd allow the aid in. I don't trust them. This is a move that is made to prepare for the ethnic cleansing of the people in Gaza. This is what I think. Or to have troops from the US going into Gaza or whatever, even though the Israeli army is being annihilated. What does the US want to come and do? Who wants to come and die for Benjamin Netanyahu and his son is partying in Miami? Which ignorant fool type of imbecile would want to do that? You'd have to be completely delusional. But what is Israel doing in Rafah? Plus, what are they declaring? Okay. Israel now controls the Rafah crossing. Why does Israel control the Rafah crossing? So that they can have full control as to how it's opened, how it's shut, everything. They're asking Egypt to cooperate with them. Egypt is saying, no, we won't deal with you on the Rafah crossing. Egypt is telling Israel, we won't deal with your forces on the Rafah crossing. Why is Egypt not doing that? Doesn't Egypt want aid in to go into Gaza? Of course, that's not the thing. Egypt does not want to legitimize the Israeli presence in the Rafah crossing because that would mean legitimizing the right of Israel to control it after this day. That's something that Egypt cannot tolerate. And to add to that, this would open the option for Israel at any given moment to open the border unilaterally without Egypt's consent to have an influx of Palestinians going into Sinai. And again, Egypt knows that and Egypt is aware of it. And don't buy anything from the idea that Israel wants to allow aid in, or that's a bunch of garbage. Israel wants to expel the Palestinian people from Gaza. And we had another official confirmation. From who? From Bezalel Smotrich, finance minister and a minister in the Ministry of Defense. They created this position for him. Netanyahu created many positions, many minister positions, some of them without a file, by the way, just to get money as a way to preserve the government and for people to support him and enter his government. And many people complain about that, by the way. However, what did Bezalel Smotrich just say? We need to control all of Gaza, settle in Gaza, and allow the Palestinian people to have a voluntary migration. Oh, voluntary migration. After you destroyed everything and killed everyone and didn't keep any lifeline in Gaza, willful migration. Of course, willful migration. That is one of the key people in the Israeli government. The second key person in the Israeli government is Itamar Ben-Gvir. These are the two people who apply most pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu. He was just in a campaign, in an event held by who? Daniela Weiss, the woman who is actively promoting the settlements in Gaza, showing development plans for people to settle in Gaza and saying we should let them leave so that we can go and settle in Gaza because it's part of Eretz Israel, as she calls it, land of Israel. This is what you have. So I do not trust anything when it comes to the US, and I don't trust anything when it comes to Israel. Now, with regards to the Hamas, and I found that a little bit strange. When they were asked about the support, they said that it's going to be managed by the Americans and it's only going to be dealing with aid, as if they have some sort of an understanding with the US. Did they reassure them? Did they provide something sufficient? What is this? We don't know. However, simultaneously, there was some leverage used. So this pier, it was attacked by resistance. And Hamas had these human frogs, they call them, which are the kind of their navy forces, really, going to Israel. After we started having this talk about the floating pier, again, in an attempt to send a sign to Israel to tell them that we're aware of what you're doing. And if this is being used or will be used at some point in the future for purposes other than the ones you declared before, then we will have a problem with it, and we will have the capacity to attack this people. That's what I think about that. Talal is also asking, do you think AIPAC's image has been damaged by the recent student protests and global awareness of the Gaza war? Oh, absolutely. Look, anyone who had a bit of an insight to Israel and the Zionist lobby globally, they know that AIPAC is there and it buys politicians from a very long time ago. We knew about AIPAC from a very long time ago. But the interesting thing is that this genocide is opening people's eyes to everything. People are questioning 9/11. People are questioning what their countries did abroad in general. People are questioning every single piece of information that they were given by their government in the past century, really. We're opening the books of history with a different view, even when you talk about World War One, World War Two. And it's right to do that. Why is it right to do that? If in the day and age where we have almost access to everything that we want, and by the way, we don't have access to everything, and many things need digging, and the truth is hard to find. Don't think that it's easy. Finding the truth is not easy. It's not an easy task. It can be draining, and it takes its toll. So the more you wanna dig, the more effort you will have, and the more you can feel the tiredness when you do that, similar to physical exercise, okay? But we have way more tools to find out what's happening. Thankfully, we have the internet. Thankfully, we have social media. Thankfully, we have more independent voices that are speaking, that are sharing, and the information is passed from one place to another very quickly. That was not the case 100 years ago. And what I wanted to say is this: if, regardless and despite the fact that we have all of this information readily available at such a short period of time, click of a button, and we still have this level of deception now from the mainstream media, what would it have looked like 100 years ago when you had no social media, when you had no internet, when you did not have many independent voices? It was approximately 100% manipulation. That's why they used to say history is written by the powerful. And again, some of you might have been aware of that already. Anyway, but more and more people are opening their eyes on everything, and that's important to do that. Whether when it comes to AIPAC, the Israeli lobby, the Zionist lobby, the people in power in many countries, not just Western countries, by the way, in Arab states, in Muslim states, that are inactive when it comes to the genocide in Gaza or not taking enough action to prevent it. And not only the people in power, it's the systems that you have in place. So, if you want to talk about a successful and functioning country, you need to talk about very rigid systems in place that protect the country regardless of who's in power. It doesn't matter which person we have, from which party, what type of ideology, what type of affiliation, so long as you have systems in place that are protecting the people and the establishment of the country, not for the sake of certain people, but for the sake of all of the people, then you would have had a different situation. Now, thankfully, where you have a level, because no country in the world at the moment, we do not have an example of a country that proves to be democratic in the full meaning of the word. And again, there is no perfection. Even if you create a democracy that truly represents the people, it will never be perfect. It's the nature of life. Nothing will be forever perfect. That's why you need to have constant review, reform, refinement, the triple R, the triple R's, I like to call it. Without that, you start to have corruption. So the systems that are in place are corrupt, not just the people. And the systems that are in place are not good. Now, there's a level of bad, right? Like in many Western countries, for example, you'll see a good level of separation of powers. Like the judicial system will have a level of independence, which is very good. You have obviously politics. The main problem is with the politics because politics is, and the judicial system in some countries, note that because in other countries they are bought and purchased. Like in the United States, you have many people in the judicial system who belong to the same clique. They buy them. They're part of the same network. Um, in some European countries, you have better examples. The main problem is with politics and the money that is injected into politics. The level of money that's injected into politics is unbelievable to a level where you just have puppets, really. You have mainstream media manipulating the people to choose between bad or worse. And there are some people who will choose worse. They're so brainwashed and twisted or morally depraved. And you have the people who think they're doing something good. They'll say, okay, we'll choose the lesser of two evils. That's the option that we have. But things are changing. Like look at Britain, for example. You had so many votes going for third parties now. And that should be something that's global. Because the people who are used to acting with the impunity almost and doing whatever they like without any repercussions will feel the pressure. And again, what is the pressure, by the way? It's just listening to the people. It's very simple. Implement the democracy you claim to be running. Marvin is saying then you have religion being dishonest. You gave an example. You said, look at the Catholic Church now calling out genocide. Look, I would refrain from using the term religion being dishonest. I think religion is religion. You make your opinion about a religion based on what you see, whether it's a religion as a whole or sects or subsects of the religion. I would say the people who are acting on behalf of the religion, the representatives or people who claim to talk on behalf of God or claim to be representatives of a certain religion more than other people, because in many cases, the same people who are representatives of certain religions or certain sects or denominations in religion, they are susceptible and vulnerable to the same things that politicians are vulnerable and susceptible to, like being blackmailed, like being bribed, like being forced to say something because of certain leverage. That exists in religious institutions, this is what I would say. Um, as to religion itself, obviously, you can see religious texts, scriptures, but I would never allow someone who talks in the name of religion to be deemed as a person who represents the religion, because that would lead to catastrophes, absolute catastrophes. I don't think, but by the way, whether you agree or disagree with the religion, that's a different thing. It's a completely different. You can wholeheartedly disagree with religion or certain concepts or beliefs or doctrines from the religion. That's totally fine, and you can debate about it and talk about it. It's perfectly fine. But what I'm saying is, saying he represents it. Look at Israel. If we want to say they represent their religion, then what would happen? And then would you want to implement that on all of the followers? We don't want to do that. But I mean, what I would say to that is that many religious institutions and representatives of uh, followers of all religions, by the way, even in the Muslim world, like, you know, you'll see some preachers and some people labeling the resistance, uh, criminalizing the resistance, saying if you support them, you're this or that. And you have other people from the same religion who say the opposite. And it's very easy, by the way, when we talk about Israel, it's a matter of human rights primarily. It's beyond, you know, what you believe in or think. It's a matter of human rights, very plain and simple. Any person with a functioning moral compass, a pair of eyes, a sound mind, knows what's right and what's wrong, and would look past the scarecrows, would look past the mainstream media noise, would look past the terror campaigns from politicians, because that is terror when someone tries to force you to believe something and intimidate you for supporting something else, especially when it's legitimate. That's called terrorism. That's thought terrorism. That's thought police. And I was just speaking about Ilan Pape being interrogated by the FBI. Why should a 70-year-old professor calling for equality and a one-state solution in Israel be held for 1 second? A 70-year-old professor of history. Not to justify detaining young people, no. But why? That's thought police. That's terrorism. That is terrorism. Hamid Sadiqi, welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for your comment, and everyone else as well participating. Where did we reach? Someone's saying about the mic. Let's increase it for a bit. Make sure your audio as well is in the is basically high enough. Marvin Vergus is asking, who is the equivalent of the ADL in the UK? One group or more trying to implement censorship. Well, they have the conservative Friends of Israel, the Labour Friends of Israel. These are the ones in politics, really. And you have other Zionist lobbies. And they work in Britain. They operate a bit more cleverly than the US. In US, it's a bit more in your face, so blunt. But saying that, you have had and still do have to this day a relatively good exposure about people who are being paid by Israel, by Hasbara, to travel to Israel for free, have these nice, luxurious trips to Israel to say a couple of things here and there, say them right. Al Jazeera English had an undercover report. I think it was in 2018, if I'm not mistaken, about the level of infiltration of Israel and Zionism in British politics, especially after the weaponization of anti-Semitism against Jeremy Corbyn at the time. And funny enough, it wasn't spoken about much in the media in the UK, and not many. It's as if people, they didn't even read up about it or care about it. Like country infiltrating your politics. They talk about Russia 24/7 and other countries. Yet when they have these lobbies acting like cancer, undermining their democracies and their sovereignty, it's as if they're blind. Why is that? How aligned are they with them? How much do they support them? How much money do they give? Which Epstein network are they part of? What type of blackmail do they have against them? So all of these questions are very important. Fadi Awad, can you speak about the ICJ hearing today? Yeah, I mean, they had this call for Israel to obviously immediately stop this action in Rafah. I'm not sure, but though, like I said about the initial ICJ case, we have no hope, really, when it comes to the ICJ enforcing something, because it stopped being about saying and implementing, even though all of these things are good in the grand scheme of things, but none of this is stopping Israel. None of this. They called Israel to stop the genocide over 2 months ago. What did we have? Israel killing a further 10,000 people. What was the difference in Israel's approach? It only started saying that I act within international law. Before, they didn't used to bother to say that. But after the ICJ case, they started saying, oh, yeah, we killed them, but we're acting within international law. So we're blowing up babies' brains out within international law. We're chopping people to bits within international law. We are bombing women within international law. We're bombing hospitals within international law. We're butchering innocent children within international law. That's the only difference. Israel understands nothing but the use of power. This is how Israel learned its lessons historically, and this is how Israel is insisting on learning its contemporary and future lessons as well. Unless something very dramatic happens, and guess what? And I'm sorry to be pessimistic, it doesn't look like it. Israel proved throughout its history that it is a violent, neo-colonial, supremacist, arrogant, genocidal state. From its formation to this day, up until the 6th of October, Israel killed 106,000 people, most of them Palestinians, but that included tens of thousands of Egyptians too, many from Lebanon and from Syria and in other countries as well. And again, I give this example and I will always keep repeating it. Israel is an expansionist project. It went to Sinai, it went to Lebanon, it wanted to go to Jordan and to reach Saudi Arabia and Iraq. How did they leave? They occupied Sinai. You talk about Judaism, Sinai is what's important to Judaism. Where were the 10 Commandments? Sinai. This is not a Jewish state. If they cared about this, go Sinai. 10 Commandments revealed to Moses, peace be upon him, in Sinai. Why don't you care about Sinai? That wasn't the tone before. It was sacred before and it was important, but then it stopped becoming so. Why? Because they were met by force. And they left after being defeated by the Egyptian army. They occupied almost half of Lebanon. How did they retreat? How did they leave? By force. They were in Gaza. How did they leave? Force. What does that prove? They only understand the language of force, being enabled and entitled, supported by Western governments, mostly the United States of America, obviously the UK, the British government, which set up this problem from the get-go with the Balfour Declaration in 1970, and continues to support this genocidal state. And that's how they prove to understand. So long as the ICJ, so long as the ICJ doesn't implement, or we don't have an enforcement to what they're doing, it's not going to stop the genocide. It will do other things. It will create a bit more awareness, although, by the way, many mainstream media outlets, they won't even talk about it as if it's unimportant, because they don't want to create this general understanding that this is a pariah state, this is a state that acts outside of scope of the international law, and that they're a genocidal state, and that their crimes are being proved. Why? So that the countries supporting them don't have to look in the mirror and stop supporting them. And obviously, I always give the argument about the same countries that support Israel and their history. They have a vast, rich history in genocide, in massacres, millions, tens of millions. And to them, what Israel's doing is child's play to many of them. So unless we see results from the ICJ, unless there's someone to enforce it, it won't stop the genocide. What's actually helping to stop the genocide and making Israel fail in its campaign is the resistance in Gaza, is the people in Gaza, is the resistance in Lebanon, is the resistance in Iraq, is the resistance in Yemen, is the resistance in Iran. That's what's supporting them, stopping them from completing their mission. And we'll end it with that. I'm sorry if I missed any of your comments, by the way, but obviously they keep going up and down here. But I'm here regularly with you anyway. Again, thank you so much for everyone who joined me and participated, all of the members, moderators, subscribers, all of the viewers. Thank you so much. If you haven't watched my other two videos, go ahead and watch them. They're quite short. Apart from that, have a lovely evening, and I will be with you very soon. Take care.